There's a Chinese company who's opening a solar panel manufacturing plant in North Carolina. So
it's just the problem is that you have these very rigid laws about what defines like made in Europe.
Also, that Chinese solar panel manufacturing, it just disguising itself as a Vietnamese company.
Oh yeah.
This reminds me of that that episode that you did, Shelley. This is like several years ago, pre-COVID, when you were in Italy, and there was all these like Chinese-run sweatshops with Chinese workers in towns that had been overrun with like Chinese gambling and prostitution and all these things, right? And
I mean, it was really only one town, but
it was Prado, right? And basically in this town, it was all Chinese people in an all Chinese environment making manufactured like handbags and clothing with materials like fabric and leather that had been imported from China. But because the final assembly steps were done technically in Italy, it was legal to label it made in Italy or made in the EU, and according to the EU's rules, right?
Yeah.
And so as a consumer, you just don't have any way to tell the difference.
Yeah, so if you get like a dress from TJ Maxx or Marshalls or something that says made in Italy, it was probably made in this Chinese sweatshop town.
Yeah, and it's terrifying to not be able to tell the difference. And this is, of course, what's going to happen with solar panels in the U.S. It's what's going to happen with EVs made in Turkey. I'm going to say Turkey like I say Czechia, which is basically with like, I get that this is the new name, but I have a hard time changing.
It'll always be Czechoslovakia to me. I have a Cold War mentality. What can I say? But yeah, so you were talking about things the U.S. can and European countries can do. I think another great thing is cutting off Chinese officials from Western financial institutions. They shouldn't be able to, Xi Jinping's daughter should not be able to study at Harvard.
But Harvard wants the best and brightest. The future leaders, Chris.
I've been to Harvard. They don't have that. So one thing we have been trying to do on this show, and by this show I mean also China Uncensored, is make people aware that the Chinese Communist Party is a threat. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people in Washington now do see that the CCP is a threat, but rather than coming to the conclusion, we have to stand up to this, they don't want to deal with it. They want to do everything they can to avoid the threat. And that's how they're dealing with it.
Well, I think there's this idea that it is possible to somehow de-escalate the threat through essentially appeasement. I don't think they would call it appeasement, but that is what it is.
It was interesting. Matthew Pottinger brought this up on the last podcast we had him on, but how the Trump administration had been giving lethal aid to Ukraine. One of the first things Biden did when coming into office was to get rid of that as a way to kind of make good with Putin. And then a little whoopsie daisy.
And then Putin was like, thanks.
We're going in.
Yeah, it is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the CCP operates to think that if we increase our military resistance, that it will trigger them into war or something like that. Which
the
is
accidental war idea.
Well, it's not just accidental war, but it's this idea that the CCP could be triggered by what the U.S. does. But in reality, the CCP is already planning on dominating Taiwan militarily if it needs to. It's already planning on dominating parts of the Pacific, potentially parts of other countries or entire other countries, the way that it did with all of Tibet and like 2/3 of Mongolia, and with Xinjiang, just basically like, we're going to dominate these areas and we're going to take them. And that mentality hasn't shifted. And so the U.S. isn't going to trigger China to suddenly become an expansionist power. They're already there. And we have to recognize that as like, this is the baseline. And so nothing we say or do to try to ease tensions, They might ease tensions, but they won't actually stop the CCP from its territorial ambitions.
That's definitely true. And I mean, I think, give credit where credit's due. The Biden administration has done many good things in regards to China. I'm thinking of all the efforts to block U.S. high tech from getting to China, particularly in the field of AI, semiconductor restrictions.
The CHIPS Act, that kind of thing.
These are good things, but that can't be seen as enough. There needs to be a goal behind this, which is understanding that they're trying to destroy us. We got to beat them.
I do think that that's
zero-sum game. Cold War mentality.
I do think that that's essentially the piece that's missing is
the why we're doing this?
Well, that there is this fear of talking about something that's not just competition. I think I saw a clip of Blinken speaking recently. I totally don't remember what he was at a think tank or something like that, and he was talking about, China is, he didn't use the word threat, but essentially he was talking about, yes, we're concerned about China, blah, blah, blah. But then he was just like, we need to compete with China. Like, it was kind of at the competition level of things. So it was like an acknowledgement that the CCP is doing all this stuff. But it's like, if we just keep talking about competition, then they won't see us as a threat. Like, they won't see that we see them as a threat. It's this weird, I don't know if you can even call it diplomacy speak, but it's this unwillingness to call a spade because you're afraid that will then trigger
the spade.
Or trigger the CCP to suddenly decide that they're at war with us. But the problem with that is if you look at Chinese internal writings going back decades, even before we normalized trade with China, a quarter century ago, China, the CCP had already considered itself at war with the West and with the United States. And they were already thinking up ways to be involved in asymmetrical warfare, like that book published in '99 by those two Chinese military colonels. If you understand that the CCP already thinks that it's at war with the United States, they already believe that, they're already operating like that, then Blinken's position makes no sense in terms of competition, because they're at war with us and we're going to compete with them. It's like a total. It's ridiculous.
We are in competition with the UK, whom we beat in 1776. Completely factually accurate. We're not in competition with China. And yes, I know American history. That was a joke.
Okay. Are you saying that for the people typing frantically now under the comments under the video?
Actually, yeah.
I do think that...
that was the Gettysburg Address, 1776. I know, come on.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not an idiot.
I'm now thinking of watching the 1776 musical with you on 4th of July.
Oh, yeah, I made a joke about that.
Yes.
Yeah, they're writing the Gettysburg. 4 scores.
Yes. All right. So I was going to give you a segue into musical theater because it's been, at least a couple of weeks since we talked about musical theater. But perhaps not. Perhaps we should just talk about China and the Philippines.
Yeah. I don't think we need musical theater digression. But so anyways, I think, again, it's very important to remember what David was saying about what you guys can do. You guys can actually, those of you in the Philippines who are watching, I love you. Those of you in the U.S., there are things you can be doing to actually make an impact in this. And so I hope we do often ask our guests what you can do, because there's often many things you can do, and take that responsibility seriously. 1776 all over again.